Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House has considered school funding. Now, I won't take interventions on the grounds that, as you said, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a hugely important debate. And I first held a debate on this issue in October 2018 in Westminster Hall under the title School Funding, and that again was extremely well attended. And the concerns expressed then about the level of school funding were consistent. Hopes were high that the Minister would be listening in listening mode and the Chancellor would open his wallet to find some extra funds. And obviously this extra funding has not appeared, and so it's crucial that this subject of funding for schools should be revisited at the earliest opportunity. We need, as a House, to keep up the pressure. I'm sure the British public can be forgiven for thinking that this House has taken leave of its senses, with Brexit acting as an all-consuming topic to the exclusion, apparently, of all others. Indeed, the messenger from the Chancellor this spring in his statement appeared to be that any spare funding that might be available is being stashed away until Brexit is being resolved. Our inability to progress Brexit now means the British taxpayer will be forking out millions for European elections that may or may not be needed and billions to expend Brexit can kicking. It's time we put the focus back onto the future of our young people and children who deserve a first-class education in a decent school environment, well-staffed with highly qualified teachers and adequately resourced classrooms. So today, this House needs to reassert its priorities. We need to put Brexit on the back burner and actually say that what's mattering is the future of our young people. This issue has significant interest across the House, and the application for this debate had around 50 supporters from most every party represented in the Chamber. I'm sure, like other honourable members, I could simply dust off my October speech, because from the feedback I've heard both nationally and locally, nothing significantly has changed in the months since the last debate on this issue. Parents are told they have a choice in where their children can attend school, yet each year, in my constituency, parents and pupils are left scrabbling around for school places, some parents being offered places a 45-minute drive away. I can only hope that the Minister answering today, and it's the same Minister, does not dust off his October speech, because quite frankly it wasn't that helpful at the time. Being told the same mantra over and over again, but not admitting that there's a deep-rooted systemic problem, means that the government, as I said in my wind-ups last time, I'm sorry to say, Minister, looks cloth-eared. So I hope today that we can have another shot. I hope he is listening. I can hope we can have another shot at persuading him that this is a funding crisis and it needs addressing. Brexit cannot be used as an excuse to keep kicking this can into the long grass. The government have told us repeatedly there's record levels of funding going into our schools, and the simple facts tell us that, overall, more money is being spent, and that's the good thing. But schools, as I've said before, are not feeling the effects of that increase. Teachers and heads keep telling me we must differentiate between the school's budget and a teaching budget. More money being spent on education, but not necessarily filtering its way down to the experience for pupils and teachers. The pressures facing schools are widely known across this House and in the Department for Education, and it should worry us that earlier this month over 1,000 councillors wrote to the Secretary of State demanding more money for local schools. And that is not just local campaigning for local elections. This is a real awareness, many of whom are on PTAs. They will understand the pressure their schools are under. The campaign supported by these councillors emphasised the real terms cut in per pupil funding and the severe problems faced by local authorities to fund education, particularly for SEND pupils. Their letter stated that the Education Policy Institute have found that almost a third of all council-run secondary schools are now in deficit, 8 in 10 academies in deficit. The Institute for Fiscal Studies recently found that the per-pupil school spending has fallen by 8% in real terms since 2010. Now, that must be considered alongside the fact that, according to the DfE's own figures, 500,000 more pupils are in our schools now since 2010. So an 8% cut and 500,000 more. 500,000 extra minds to neuter. I can't say this.
Nurture.
Nurture. That's it.
Nurture.
Nurture.
Neuter.
I'm not neuter. 500,000 extra minds to nurture. Shh. And that cannot be done on the cheap. So, Minister, I'm not asking for loaves and fishes miracles for my local schools. I do not expect a smaller amount of money to be spent amongst more people. I'm asking for a financial settlement to reflect the extra strain on the budget. A funding formula that delivers for all our schools, not robbing Peter to pay Paul when it's next tinkered with. The IFS also reported that sixth forms have endured a 21% reduction in per pupil spending since 2011, and it estimates that by 2019-20, spending per sixth form pupil will be lower than at any point since 2002. Now, that is going back a very long way. I'm sure the Minister will agree that the picture varies, but the signs that indicate schools are not benefiting universally, and we must find a new funding formula. Many schools I've spoken to have reiterated that national funding formula must cover the funding needed for schools, not just the pupil-led aspects. Pupils and parents expect those schools to be fit for purpose as well as provide lessons. The Sutton Trust reports that up to two-thirds of secondary schools have reported a cut to teaching staff in their schools for financial reasons. We're also seeing a worrying trend in school cuts to extracurricular activities and facilities, which can be so important for many children as they make their way through their school career. Around 60% of secondary school teachers have reported cuts in IT equipment for cost reasons, with 40% saying school outfittings have cut too. So we must be concerned that almost a third of teachers polled by the Sutton Trust reported a cut in sporting provision for pupils in our schools. And as I said in the last debate, and I'll say it again, Sian Kilpatrick, head of Berners Heath School in my constituency, wrote to her parents, and she's not alone in doing this, explaining the financial squeeze that her school faces due to the funding restrictions. She compiled a list of additional things she must allocate funding to, not a nice-to-have list, a must-be-done list, including vital outdoor risk assessments, legal human resources advice, general maintenance costs, staff insurance payments. And that's some of the additional costs that many schools have to find money for. And on top of that, she even had to pay £8,000 to get her school trees pruned. Schools across the country are facing similar shopping lists that suck up vital school funding. Schools are concerned about their ability to plan the finances. With national funding formula being introduced over several years, there's a huge uncertainty about how it will affect individual schools. Head teachers are unwilling to commit to long-term planning. That cannot be right. Whichever government is in power, we need a long-term certainty for our schools' futures. Angela Donkin of the National Foundation for Education Research has said there are several key factors that have stretched budgets. I'm sure others will list them today. But the national insurance contributions, the employer pension contributions, an ageing building stock, teacher pay awards, and a requirement for all students to continue in education. There are but a few, and I won't go through all of them because I know how many people want to speak. But the obligations on schools to offer services that were previously carried out by other public agencies has been seen across the country. A survey by Worthless found 94% of head teachers polled said their schools now routinely delivered services previously provided by local authorities. This is not a debating point. This is something that will be agreed with whoever is asked on whichever local authority, whichever county, whichever politician. And all these resulted in immense strains on school budgets. So yes, Minister, more money is going in, but so much more is being asked of that money. Staff and staffing costs are under severe pressure. Many staff in my constituency can't afford to live in the area. The churn and turnover of staff is huge, and many staff are let go because the school finds it easier and cheaper to take on newly qualified, less expensive members of staff. With difficult roles that our teachers now have to fill, we cannot expect a school to run on young, inexperienced teachers. Is it any wonder that the number of teachers leaving the profession within 4 years is on the rise, and the number of vacancies and temporarily filled posts is increasing? So I don't want to go through all my facts and figures because I'd like to leave a couple of minutes at the end to sum up. But let's just say there was a widespread unhappiness about the recent handling of the teacher pay announcement. The key problem is that schools have to fund the first 1% of that pay rise. Nothing like dipping your hand in someone else's pocket, I would say to the Chancellor. Yes, we want to pay our teachers. Yes, we want to pay our teaching assistants more. They do a wonderful job. But if we increase the pay rises, we cannot then expect that some of that pay rise has to be funded for by the school, who then have to take the budget from somewhere else. Declan Linnane, the head of Nicola Breakspear School in St Albans, told me that 1% increase alone will cost his school £30,000, money that he just doesn't have. So the Department of Education reports that we have upwards of 1 million pupils with special educational needs. This number is rising significantly. Those children will often have to have classroom assistance and help. Those children will often present an additional resource need for a school? Is it any wonder that parents tell me that there's often a reluctance to statement children who have special educational needs? There is often greater pupil exclusion from pupils who have difficulties that manifest themselves in disruptive classroom behaviour. So I'm going to conclude my remarks now, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I just want to ask 3 questions that the Minister can potentially answer at the end of his speech. Question 1, this is from a teacher in my constituency. What guarantee can we have with regard to the cost of the teacher pension employer contribution increases and salary increases? He said that currently we've only been given funding information for 2019-20 academic year and nothing for the future beyond that. Question 2, staff recruitment at crisis level. How can the government make the profession more attractive to graduates as recent initiatives are failing? And question 3, the basic rate for 16 to 19-year-old funding has been frozen at £4,000 per pupil since 2013-14. And the IFS reports that school sixth forms have faced budget cuts of 21%. What commitment will be given to address that particular need going forward?